This evening we take up the subject of Srividya, which is a beautiful synthesis of Tantric and Vedantic teaching. There are a number of texts that are important in the study of this science of spirituality. But texts themselves are not the most important thing. In the Srividya school, texts may be amassed, but what the teacher selects from the texts to transmit is what is important. And the interpretation that the guru derives from the teaching is what is important. So many doctrinal disputes which have riven philosophy in India over the centuries are absent in Tantric dialogue, because the dialogue is not rhetorical, and it is not intended to influence teaching. For them, the texts are reservoirs of power and consciousness which are to be drawn upon in a way that the guru deems is applicable to the sadhak, to the one who's doing the sadhana. And you may know, having studied some of this, that the preparation, the readiness of the disciple is all important. The guru will give according to the nature of the seeker, if he accepts the disciple at all. Many seekers are turned away, asked to become initiates into the path, but are not given initiation. On the other hand, anyone is welcome, whether a person is a man or a woman, or from high caste or low caste, it doesn't matter. In the Tantra, generally, you find this kind of opening, accepting all who apply, if they have the basic stuff within, and that is measured in terms of consciousness. So, the evidence that we have for the primary body of the practice in the Srividya school, textually, probably we would take back to the Sri Lalita Sahasranama, the Tantra Raja Tantra, works like that, which have been edified by great commentators like Bhaskara Raya Makin, who was of the 18th century, and taking the Sri Lalita Sahasranam, 1,000 Names of the Divine Mother, as an example, we see different elements constituting the worship of that reality. This reality, again, is powerful. It is, in fact, consciousness as power. It is not that the principal goddess worshipped in these 1,000 names, Lalita Tripurasundari, is absent a connection to Lord Shiva, who, as you know, is paramount in the Tantric teachings. But she is identified with him in this wonderful bi-unity expressed as Shiva Shakti. She is worshipped in her stula form, that is, her physical aspect. And there are a number of names which are applied directly to painting a description of what she looks like, so that when you concentrate, you can visualize her in her entirety and come into communion with her through the external side of her being. And then there is the sukshma side of her nature. And her sukshma rupa is the 15-syllabled mantra, which is Srividya, which is broken down into 3 kutas, with I think 5, 6, and 4 elements in each. In the Kadi division, there's also a Hadi division, which is no longer extant in South India. But the Kadi division is still very popular. And in fact, among all the documents which are related to the Srividya practice, Sri Lalita Sahasranama is the most popular. The name Lalita suggests she who sports in her transcendence. Those of you who have had the opportunity to listen to Sri M.P. Pandit's wonderful recitation of the 1,000 names of the Divine Mother have been treated to something which is deeply moving and also deeply aesthetic. There are other South Indian ways in which one can chant these names, but they are not so lovely as the way that he does it. She is described in the opening shloka as Sri Mata, the mother. The mother who is auspicious, the one who sits as the queen of all queens, the queen of all kings, upon the lion, which is the symbol of royalty. And out of the fire of consciousness, she steps forward in order to create the world and establish the divine way. And always she is supporting the manifestation of this divinity. And as we have seen in other teachings, which related to Kashmir Shaivism, the idea of a triadic wisdom appears here as well, because probably the Srividya practice began in Kashmir, but had a connection back to the south of India. And here in the south, it has found its final home. It is still very popular in the south, but we can see throughout the literature that it had at least these 2 homes, and they were in dialogue with each other. But Sri Lalita Sahasranama is not from the north. That arises in probably a mutt of Shankaracharya's vintage, either in Sringeri or in Kanchipuram. This list of 1,000 names, the stotra, could be as old as the 8th century. We think the Srividya mantra may also be that old. So these are together part of the Srividya practice, which has these various elements combining to teach the disciple by visualization, by mantra recitation, and finally through the use of the yantra, the Sri Chakra, which you have no doubt seen before, looking like this in many texts of India. The Sri Chakra is triadic in this way. It represents the point at which the divine manifests in the world. And that point represents the transcendence. It is not an actual physical point, but a portal which leads us beyond manifestation. And then it's set in a trikona, a triangle, which represents the power of the Shakti. And the third element, of course, is the Atman, the soul of the individual, who is a representative of this conjunction of consciousness and being as manifested. If you look at the interlocking triangles, those which rise up and those which descend form other triangles, all of which have led to the Srishti, the manifestation, the creation of the world. And you can see that this world is in a sense bordered by lotus petals. And the lotus petals represent the presence of the divinity, of the Supreme, of Sadashiva. And those three circles making orbits around all this world, the same thing, the same reality of the Supreme. The one who becomes two, Shiva and Shakti, another triad. And then, connecting to the five elements from earth to fire, 5 times 3 and 15, and the Mula mantra, the root mantra of Srividya, represents symbolically all of this. And the root mantra is not lexicographical. It has no meaning per se. If you read it, it would have no meaning to you because it is beyond language. And you cannot know what the meaning is through thinking about it, through pondering it, trying to follow it out intellectually. Rather, the mantra only reveals its significance to you when the guru tells you what the different elements mean. So for over 1,000 years, we have had this continuing tradition of the Srividya, which moves from the mouth of the teacher to the ear of the disciple. The texts, when they finally start getting written down, say around the 10th century or so, are not unimportant. They simply are not pivotally important, because only the sections which the guru selects again, and which he gives emphasis to, and his interpretation of them matters. Without his selection, there is no empowerment in the mantra. So you can pick these books up and read them and try to wield the power that may be in them. But if you have not been given the initiatory mantra, you won't be able to unlock it. And that is deliberate. They will go to extreme steps to protect the environment when they're going to perform the puja, the external ritual, which in a sense brings into manifestation what these things potentially mean from any outside interference or observance, so there can be no accident. Now sometimes it's true that if you're walking through a temple, you might hear somebody intoning the mantra, but not having been given its initiatory power from the guru, you won't really be able to use it. You might overhear, you might eavesdrop, but it won't do you any good. But still, they try to protect you from even having a glimpse at it. The same thing is true when we come to Sri Chakra, to the visualization, to the engine, the diagram. There too, it is explained point by point what the connections are between the diagram, each triangle, how it relates to seed syllables in the mantra, how that relates to the inner being of the cosmos. And so there's an entire cosmography, a map of the universe that is shared among all these elements. In the visualization, in the mantra, and in the yantra, there is a profound revealing of what is the nature of this goddess. And she's called Tripura Sundari. We said she was Lalita, she who sports in her transcendence, but Tripura refers to the three cities. Now, from Sri Aurobindo's perspective, we would immediately say that these three cities would represent matter, life, and mind. And it may be so that that would be the meaning to us, and we would make use of it in that way. But the triplicities taught inside the Srividya school can refer to other realities as well, like the three great gods of creation, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, who create, sustain, and dissolve the universe. But all of them, again, are seen as coming out of her, out of Lalita Tripura Sundari. Sundari means the beauty, the auspiciousness. So, she shares mythology in common with some of the other goddess myths that we've seen. And it always begins with somebody making what seems to be a casual mistake. Kama is trying to interrupt Shiva during one of his meditations. And Shiva opens his third eye and burns Kama. And he's reduced to ashes. Chitrakarma, who is one of the lords of the Ganas, of the little sprites, gathers up all the ashes, mounts them into a mass, and intones the Shata Rudriya mantra. And this mass leaps into life with Lord Shiva's blessings and performs such wonderful austerities that Shiva is impressed and says, Bandh, Bandh. So he gets this name, Bandhasara. And Shiva gives him the lordship of the earth for 60,000 years. And of course, he works hard. Asuras are not lazy. Asuras go out and they do stuff. And he starts building and constructs the world to suit him. And starts edging over and muscling out the gods, and they get alarmed. And they go to see if they can get the divine to intercede. And in the Lalitopakyana, there's an interesting observation. Indra convinces all the gods that the way to stop Bandhasara is for them to offer themselves according to Vedic sacrifices, and then intone the great power, the Mahashakti, Parashakti, to manifest. And so they do that. The gods sacrifice themselves, put themselves on the fire. And the goddess indeed comes and restores them to their fullness. back to their vigor. But note, they really did undergo the sacrifice. And the sacrifice really works. It calls the transcendent power into manifestation. So, Lalita has come, and they're asking her to go down and fight this battle and put down Bandasara. And she is also asked to marry. And she does this, and interestingly, there is a mention, I think, in the 30th name of the thread that she wears to signify marriage, which is only done in South India. So, anyway, she agrees to marry and chooses to marry Lord Shiva and garlands him, but in so doing declines to be with him, preferring instead to have her independence and to maintain her transcendence. And a few years later, she happens to go down to earth, armed with her Shaktis. She's had special jewels made by Vishwakarma, the Vedic universal worker and blacksmith. And she has powers from all the gods that she's collected. And she goes looking for this band of asuras who've taken over the cosmos. And along the way, she meets them all. She meets Mahisha, destroys him, reflecting what Durga had done, and in a sense this proclaims her superiority even to Durga. And keeps moving forward through all of these various gods, including Hiranyakashipus. There are thousands of them who are created. She creates one Prahlada who comes and destroys all of the Hiranyakashipus. And finally, taking away all of Bandasara's generals, forces him to come and fight her. And since he has had this rather unwieldy appetite and irrepressible desire, she kills him with the weapon of desirelessness. And that is the end of him. And then, of course, there arises this litany of 1,000 names in worship of her. These 1,000 names are boiled down to 300, which are considered to be even more powerful. Each of these names represents some signal aspect of the divine consciousness. But the 300 are seen as being even more powerful. And if there is some exoteric meaning easily assignable to the 1,000, to the 300 it is less easy. Yet, as a guide through all of this, we have Bhaskara Raya Makin, who is tremendous. There is still a translation of the 1,000 names of the Divine Mother available in extant in English, which one can get and read. And even in English, his analysis is so penetrating and beautiful that it's worth our time. So the Sri Chakra, the Srividya, and the image, the murti of the Divine Mother, all are elements of this manifold approach by which we discover, through the ritual, through the meditation, through the self-offering, where that divinity resides in us, and then we make that divinity manifest. Now, while there is a soteriological aspect, that is to say that we're trying to find what is immortal in ourselves and ally that with what is transcendent, there is also in the Srividya this insistence that the world is real and just, and that Sri Lalita Tripura Sundari is here to make the world a harmonious scene. She is Soumya in her aspect. She is benign. Even when she laughs and emits Durga to take care of business upon earth, she controls that destructive impulse and uses it only insofar as it must be done, and then withdraws it. So, in all aspects, whether they're expressions of generating more children, generating prosperity, generating happiness in life, she is avid of all of these goals. She wants to enrich reality with the delight and the consciousness that are her essence. And so the world is never taboo to the practitioner of the Srividya. Rather, the world is the very scene of the divine manifestation and has to be accepted. There is no school of renunciation in Srividya. Now, ironically, of course, the Samaya version of the Srividya leans very heavily on its articulation through the Shankara tradition. And even iconically, that is so curious, because when you see the mutts present the Sri Chakra as an icon, they reverse the polarity so that Shiva becomes paramount, where in the Srividya tradition, Shakti is paramount over Shiva. So, what remains to say is that this synthesis between the Kashmir Shaivism of the Srividya school and the non-dualism of Shankara is an uncomfortable alliance to philosophers, because in the first, in the Kashmir Shaivism school, there is a theistic non-dualism. Only Shiva exists, only the divine exists, but it's the divine person. And in Shankara's school of non-dualism, that is nameless. That is a homogenized sheer being, which is only existence and does not take form except through the formation of ignorance in the human consciousness. This is a tension that is little acknowledged in the Srividya tradition. Nobody bothers to go there. Nobody takes that up and argues that out. Bhaskararaya simply notes what the inner meaning is of the elements and walks away from the disputes, which is a lovely practice that one might wish was more widespread. So, close to us, Sri Kapali Shastriya was an initiate and a siddha in the Srividya tradition. M.P. Pandit, who spent a great many years with Kapali Ji in the Sri Aurobindo ashram, and knew him even before, when they would meet at Sirsi, knew a great deal about Srividya and could write about it as if he had been an adept practicing for many years himself. Shankara Narayanan, who was one of Kapali's most prominent disciples, has written several books, The 10 Cosmic Powers. This one that we've been looking at, Sri Chakra, and some other works which would be worth your looking at as well. So lots of connections there. It is interesting that what was so typical of Kapali Shastriya, that he was both a Vaidika, a student of the Veda, and a Tantric at one and the same time, is typical of the Srividya school. There is no necessary division among them. What is interesting, again, is that when you become an initiate in the Samaya branch of the Srividya school, one is living a life completely in accordance with the Smarta tradition, that you live a Brahmanically correct life. You don't engage in any of the activities that would bring a besmirching to your reputation. So it's a very high, pure practice that is undertaken. And you can see that reflected in every photograph and every sentence that Kapali Shastriya wrote. Such a fine, wonderful being. And I presume that Ganapati Muni was of the same lineage. I presume it to be true. So, enough. Any questions to ask this evening?
You know, you played verses from Devi Mahatmya to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
What's the connection between that composition many centuries earlier, I imagine?
Right, I could have been playing that throughout these last several weeks because we've been dealing with the goddess tradition generally. And this is sometimes taken up in Srividya practice as well, as an element in mantra recitation, the mantra shastra. But in the Srividya school, books from disparate sources are often used. Whatever seems to strike the fancy of the teacher, the guru, will be brought in and used as an element of instruction. It's not limited to the known canon of 64 texts, 64 tantras. It may be something outside that they bring in. But this is a very old tradition, and since there is a connection to the Srividya, I thought we would play this tonight, Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu, because it speaks to the goddess.
All these stories, whether Lalita, Shri Lalita, or the original Devi or Durga, they all have the story that there's a big asuric power and has to be put down. And so the goddess comes down with combined strength of other devas, and then she succeeds in putting it down. And that's kind of a common theme among several of these stories. Am I right?
You're right to an extent, but it seems that, for instance, in the Lalitopakhyanam, Shiva agrees to come fight as an ally with her on the field. So in a sense, she's the general, he's the warrior. And he's supposed to be the supreme being of the universe. So there's actually a subtle continuing promotion of the Mahadevi, of the great goddess, who is the real boss of the universe. It is her manifestation, and all the gods are simply representations of her power. So in a sense, when they run out of the capacity to set things right, they have to go get Mama to come in and put the children in their place. And remember, for her, the Asuras are her children too. They're permitted to play in the universe as part of the sport, but they're not allowed to take over the game entirely, because there's something that she wants to do, and she does it more fulfillingly through the devas than through the asuras. She uses even the pranks and the miscreant behaviors of the asuras to her own advantage ultimately. But she maintains control and never gets flustered in doing it. She keeps that Samya aspect as Lalita Tripurasundari, the goddess of the three cities, the auspicious, wise goddess of the three cities. Yeah. And remember, she is Sri also. So in a way, what is, the rather passive figure of Lakshmi in the Vaishnava tradition is here. Not only beneficent and radiantly beautiful and has the power of 1,000 suns when she smiles, but has actual control of the physical, the subtle, and the transcendent worlds. She is the all-ruler, and she's described as being without support. And one of her epithets in the 1,000 Names is she is without support.
Is it also true that the Devi story has been an inspiring motif for fighting against the British and the Muslims and
well, you're trying to absolutely, I agree with you. Sri Aurobindo used that very idea. He was trying to develop some vigor and power of resistance in what had become a sleepy citizenry in India, and invoked the image of the Divine Mother, and so did, what was his name?
Chatterjee?
Yeah. And Paul, didn't he also? B.C. Paul?
Maybe.
Bankim Chatterjee?
Yeah, Bankim Chatterjee did,
Yeah? I think his name, Bankim Chatterjee Paul, right? So...
I thought it was Bankim Chandra Chatterjee or Chattopadhyaya, two names he had.
Yeah, I might be wrong. It's been a while since I've looked at that. You're probably right, but Sri Aurobindo wasn't the only one. But there were many people who spoke like that. I remember an image that Sri Aurobindo used in writing that I borrowed or incorporated into a paper that I wrote on Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo when I was doing a graduate class. He said when a son comes along and sees a vampire sucking the blood out of his mother, his first act is not to approach cautiously and ask this gentleman if he would leave, but to grab him and pull him off. He said, and that's what we have to do with Britain, who is sucking the blood out of India. And I thought it was a wonderful metaphor, and I used it. And the fellow whom you knew, Baba Singh, who was teaching that course, admitted that he thought it was effective, but he didn't much like me using it in the same paper in which Mahatma Gandhi's name came. I used it to show that Sri Aurobindo's reaction was more natural. That the thing is to get the British out of India, not to play nice with them and see if they'll give us, a better cup of tea.
Even one of the Sikh gurus, in fact the last one, Guru Gobind Singh, 10th Guru, he wrote Chandi the War in Punjabi. And that's similar thing, same kind of a story.
Right.
To fight against the Muslims.
But with a goddess at the center.
Goddess at the center.
Goddess at the center, yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting thing because the Sikhs are not thought of as being mother-centric as being interested in personalized forms of the divinity of any kind. So, and you can't worship a goddess without her having a form, being a person. So,
Well, there's a bit of a dispute on that. You know, some fundamental Sikhs, they deny that he could have written that.
yes, I agree. Yeah. And that may be adjudicated finally in scholastic circles. The important takeaway for us is that the divine manifests itself in the world, stations itself here, always dwells in us, is the fire in our consciousness, is the bliss in our experiences, and is the very stuff of our own nature. And we are like the universe. All that is in us is in the universe. We are kindred. Why? Because we have one mother, one source, one divinity has thrown all this out there, and yet it remains inside of her being. The universe is not an accident. The universe is not a scene of suffering. The universe is not a scene in which something happens to someone unfairly, because it is the divine which is experiencing itself through manifold entities all at once. And if we can find our way back to the center, to the bindu, very pinpoint of that Sri Chakra, then we can see from there the harmony of the worlds, and that all of this is samarasya parayana. So, I think we'll go for our meditation. And next week, I should mention that what we'll do is look at the Bhakti tradition in India with special emphasis and focus on Chaitanya. We will not ignore the Shaiva schools of devotion, though, in doing that. Namaste, Jai Ma.